Chapter 2010, Donghua Heavens. Chapter 2010, Donghua Heavens. Donghua Heavens, the absolute core of the Donghua domain, was also the strongest among all the continents of the domain. Its terrain was high above the others, hence the name Donghua Heavens. After the news came out of the domain chief's manor, it quickly spread toward every other continent within Donghua domain. As a result, cultivators from the surrounding continents had come to Donghua Heavens, with many others still on their way. The entire Donghua Heavens seemed extremely festive. It was as if they were holding a feast of Donghua domain. Donghua Heavens was the location of Donghua domain chief's manor, as well as the most powerful continent in the region. There were many powerful forces with countless top-level cultivators, but Megaforce Principality was still a rarity. The vast and endless Donghua Heavens did not have many cities. After countless years of development, the entire continent had been built into one cohesive whole with perfect connections. Even the mountains and the ocean regions had been occupied by powerful cultivators, connected to one another without any issues. Its name may have derived from this design. Donghua Heavens was one entirety, like a massive city without bounds. If it was another continent, it could be divided into hundreds of cities. But since the domain chief's manor was here, there was no need for so many distinctive divisions. The Lung family was a powerful family in Donghua Heavens. Although it was not the strongest, its influence was considerable. With members of the family that were 9th realm Renhunag, the family would have been considered top level on any continent. But in Donghua Heavens, although it was considered a family of power, it was not at the top level. There were many families or sects in Donghua Heavens that were more powerful than the Lung family. At this time, the cultivators of the Lung family were busy with their own affairs. Somewhere in a courtyard, several children and a young man were playing, a scene of tranquil beauty. However, a brilliant light appeared at the Lung family's compound, shot into the sky. Suddenly there was a very strong fluctuation of the spatial great path in the compound grounds. A group of people in the courtyard looked up and exclaimed, "My goodness, what is that?" Among the family members, a group of cultivators levitated into the sky, looking at that golden beam of light rushing into the sky. Some elders who knew what was going on looked sharply with their eyes and whispered, "They are here." "Who?" someone asked. "Cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower from the Dongxiao continent," said the man. As that golden light beam fell from the sky, a group of men emerged from it. It was as if it had materialized out of thin air, descending into Lung's territory. "Clan Lord! Clan Lord!" Below, many called out and saw an elderly man leap into the sky to greet those that came from the void. He laughed loudly. "Everyone welcome." The group that arrived were Yi Futian, Zhong Chan, and the others. They had come to Donghua Heavens earlier than expected. However, this time they did not travel by road, but took advantage of the grand matrix of space. Donghua Heavens was the main continent, and at Donghua Domain Chief's manor, there was a supreme grand matrix of space that led to other main continents, which was much more convenient. In addition, all the top forces would try their best to create a great path of space, so they could come here at any time. Wangshan Watchtower was no exception. There was a portal in Donghua Heavens, and it was located at the Lung family. They had established a super powerful matrix here, which could descend directly to Donghua Heavens from Wangshan Watchtower. The clan lord of the Lung family was an elder. A middle-aged man stood beside him with a smile. This man was the next in line of the Lung family, Skysword Lung Quangsheng, an extremely well-known character. He had cultivated at Wangshan Watchtower and associated with the Millet Emperor. Because of this relationship, Wangshan Watchtower's teleportation matrix to Donghua Heavens was built inside the Lung family compound. Above the grand matrix, Yi Futian and his party stood there with Li Chongxing in front, who looked at the old clan lord and smiled. "Clan Lord Lung is much too kind. We came without notice. Please pardon our disturbance." "You are too humble," Clan Lord Lung said with a smile. "You are all Quangxing's brothers. There's no disturbance to speak of. I was just thinking that after the news, the domain chief's manor should personally dispatch a messenger to inform Wangshan Watchtower, and that you may be here. I was prepared to see you all, and was very much looking forward to it." "Good to see Senior Brotherly again," Sky Sword Lung Quangxing stood there with a smile. He had thick eyebrows and deep-set eyes with a square jaw. He looked mighty and authoritative, and he inspired respect from those who laid eyes on him. Just him standing there was enough to give people a sense of awe. The name Sky Sword was by no means a vain moniker. Junior brother Lung, Li Changxing said with a smile. Long time no see. You are almost catching up to my realm. No wonder I have not seen you cultivating at Wangshan Watchtower all these years. How can you say that, brother? I have been traveling across the continents of Divine Prefecture all these years to cultivate and comprehend. It hasn't been long since I came back here. I didn't expect to get together with my brothers and everyone else so soon. What a happy happenstance. Sky Sword Lung Quangxing laughed and said, This time, I am going to drink to my heart's content. Okay, Quangxing, let's not chit-chat while hanging out here. The old clan lord laughed. Lung Quangxing caught himself with an embarrassed smile. Brothers, please come with me. The banquet is being prepared. We will drink a bit first. All right then. Everyone smiled and nodded as the group followed Lung Quangxing to the banquet hall of the Lung family. Chief Lord Lung waved his hand. Everyone, please take a seat. Everyone found a place to sit down, and someone next to them was serving wine. They saw that Sky Sword was looked at Zhong Chan with a smile, who was sitting across from Li Changxing, and said, Brother Zhong, when I left years ago, you were still in the realm of Middle Renhuang. Now you are already in the upper level, and your great path is still perfect. Even in Donghua Heavens, I hear people mention you from time to time, saying that Zhong Chan of Wangshan Watchtower is no less than the desolation of Badlands' divine palace and Sword Goddess's eldest disciple Jiang Yueli. They have already achieved their fame for a long time, while I still have some ways to go, Zhong Chan responded. Well, at this level, it's just a matter of waiting. Now, I am afraid I am no longer a suitable opponent for you either, Sky Sword Lung Quangxing said, laughing. Zhong Chan shook his head and smiled without responding. What the other said was the truth. His strength, by now, should be well above that of senior brother Sky Sword. I heard that there were some disturbances on that side of Divine Ocean continent, but I didn't get any specifics. What's going on? Lung Quangxing asked again. A few months ago, Emperor Shi crossing the Divine Tribulation had caused a sensation in the entire Donghua domain. Everyone knew about it, so the news of trouble also spread, even to Donghua Heavens. The grievances between the ancient royal family of Yan and Wangshan Watchtower have been for a long time. But this time, Lingxiao Palace also got involved for some reason, Li Changxing responded. Lingxiao Palace and Wangshan Watchtower have never had any ill will towards each other, and they actually got involved, said Clan Lord Lung with a frown. Lingxiao Palace was a major force of power in Donghua Heavens. If the conflict intensified, it was definitely not good news for Wangshan Watchtower. I don't know the reason at this time. We came to Donghua Heavens to see if they will do anything, Li Changxing continued. Clan Lord Lung nodded without saying much. Which one of you is Yi Liunian? As he was speaking, he surveyed the crowd and stopped when he saw Yi Futian. I am. Yi Futian smiled. Clan Lord Lung looked at Yi Futian seriously, with a hint of admiration in his eyes. One sword strike to defeat Yan Dongyang, the prince of the ancient royal family of Yan, and crossed the realm in the battle to defeat Lingyi, the young master of the Lingxiao Palace. Wangshan Watchtower will produce yet another outstanding figure. I have a feeling that there may be 3 awesome figures in the future of Wangshan Watchtower. Elder is much too generous, Yi Futian said modestly. And I'm not considered a disciple of Wangshan Watchtower. However, senior brother Li and senior brother Zhong will be able to inherit cultivation from the Millet Emperor. Clan Lord Lung showed a look of surprise. So he wasn't a disciple of the Millet Emperor. Perhaps it was because of Eastern Deity Island. How is Donghua Heavens? This once every 50-year event will be extremely festive, said Li Changxing. Of course, all of Donghua Heavens is in a jubilant mood. Many cultivators are looking forward to it. This time around, the Domain Chief's Manor will also be open to recruiting cultivators. Many people are aching to become a member of the Domain Chief's Manor. Clan Lord Lung continued. In addition, all the top figures from all continents will gather in Donghua Heavens. By then, We will be able to see many excellent battles, and see how the chief will choose. We have to ask for the Lord's opinion. Liuyan wanted to cultivate at domain chief's manor, Li Changxing said, which surprised the clan lord a great deal. Yi Futian did not enter Wangshan Watchtower, but planned to enter the domain chief's manor for cultivation? He couldn't really understand this. Was it also because of Eastern Deity Island? Sure. Without thinking much about it, he nodded and promised, I will see what I can do. But you should know that no matter what, any slight movement will be known to everyone. That's true enough. Li Changxing nodded. Then, we will just have to wait quietly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2011 Instruction. Chapter 2011 Instruction. Yi Futian and his party settled down at the Lung family's compound. After many nearby family members got wind of the news, visitors started trailing in. However, most of them were there, hoping to catch a glimpse of Zhong Chan, this upcoming figure in Donghua domain. Thus, Zhong Chan was quite preoccupied. People from Donghua Heavens came specifically to visit him. Many of them were elders, which made it difficult to refuse their visits, especially when many of them were familial forces that had enjoyed good relationships with the Lung family over the years. Yi Futian and Li Changxing were together in a courtyard. As Li Changxing looked into the distance, he smiled and said, Brother Zhong is very busy now. These people who came to visit were all heads of some of the most influential families. Brother Zhong will become one of the future pillars of Donghua domain. Aside from being valued by these principalities, it doesn't hurt to forge friendships with some of these families, Yi Futian said with a smile. This was simple enough to understand. If someone was acquainted with powerful figures such as the Millet Emperor or Emperor Shi, it was an excellent thing. And now, who wouldn't be happy to make some connections with Zhong Chan before becoming a powerful man of the region? That's true enough. Some of them even brought along their most accomplished young ladies of the clan, every one of them superior in both looks and talent. What kind of suggestion was that? And what does it look like to others? Kind of undignified. Li Changxing seemed to find the whole affair rather amusing as he continued with a smile. But some of them were true beauties. Brother Zhong does not have a path companion yet. Perhaps there is an opportunity here. Yi Futian knew that Li Changxing was joking. With Zhong Chan's strength and status today, the path companion worthy of him must also be extremely extraordinary. However, it was also obvious that he had no such thoughts, or he wouldn't have waited until now unless he had met his perfect match. However, as they were already in the realm of Renhuang, this kind of peddling was indeed inappropriate, though it did indicate the importance that these great families placed on Zhong Chan. They did not hesitate to lower themselves for a chance to recruit him into their own family. If they succeeded, this upcoming star would become part of their family, and the benefits that were associated with this relationship were quite obvious to all. Of course, from Yi Futian's perspective, this idea was bound to fail. At this point, two people were walking this way. They were youngsters from the Lung family. Both of them looked to be no more than 20, with a fairly low level of cultivation. They were a boy and a girl, both good-looking, and they appeared to be well-mannered. Lung Yan, Lung Shi greet the elders. The two came in front of Li Changxing and Yi Futian, bowing slightly. Li Changxing nodded slightly. What is it? We are here to seek advice on cultivation, Lung Shi said. Li Changxing had an amused look on his face. It was normal for the Lung family's descendants to ask the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower for advice. After all, it was an opportunity. Even if there was no gain, there was no loss either. And if some comprehension could be gained from it, all the better. Didn't all the brothers and sisters of your family go to Zhong Chan for advice these days? He is very talented, you know. You should go ask him, Li Changxing smiled. The elders told us that the elders that came from Wangshan Watchtower are a worthy source of instruction for us. In addition to Elder Zhong, Elder Li and Elder Yi are extraordinary figures whose comprehensions and cultivations are comparable to that of Elder Zhong. Lung Shi bowed. He appeared very polite and courteous. Little girl knows how to talk, Li Chongqing said with a smile. Although Lung Xi looked young, she wasn't actually quite as young as she looked. After all, she had a sage-level cultivation. However, in front of an old guy like Li Chongqing, she was just a little girl. He had been cultivating for many years, and he was a supreme existence in the 9th realm of Renhuang. Very well. Since you said it so nicely, ask away, Li Chongqing replied with a smile. Elder, what about me? Lung Yan asked. Over there. Li Chongqing pointed to Yi Futian as Lung Yan's eyes fell on him, a little unsure. He heard from the elders that Yi Futian was mighty and talented. He did not doubt that. But Yi Futian, after all, was much younger. Whether it was Li Chongqing of the 9th realm, or the Zhong Chan of Upper Renhuang with perfect great path, they were both more suitable for teaching others than Yi Futian. This was not about talent, but comprehension and cultivation. He thought that Li Chongqing and Zhong Chan were both stronger because of their realms. Why don't you believe it? Li Chongqing smiled when he saw the look in Lung Yan's eyes. I dare not. Lung Yan shook his head and bowed to Yi Futian. If Elder is willing to advise me, I'd be honored. Senior brother was too lazy himself, so he sicked you on me. Yi Futian smiled at Li Chongqing, then nodded to Lung Yan. What do you want to ask? Thank you, Elder. When Lung Yan heard Yi Futian's words, he knew that the other had acquiesced to instruct him. So he said, I would like to ask for some pointers on blade techniques. People of the Lung family were known for their skills at swords. Lung Quangxing himself had the moniker of Sky Sword. I am good at swordsmanship, but no knowledge of blade techniques at all, said Yi Futian. The elders said that cultivation is unbounded, especially when it reaches a certain realm. Uncle is good at blade techniques, but he too went to Wangshan Watchtower to cultivate. I believe that even if the elder didn't cultivate in blade techniques, you would still be able to give me some pointers, replied Lung Yan. Yi Futian smiled. Lung Yan knew how to seize the opportunity. Next to them, Li Chongqing was already instructing Lung Xi, so he said, All right, what questions do you have? Among my peers in the family, my talent was SOSO, and my combat effectiveness is about mid-range as well. Some brothers of my generation cultivated the same blade techniques, but they are much better than me. Therefore, I would like you, sir, to see where the problems are in my techniques, Lung Yan said to Yi Futian. He didn't diagnose his own problem, but asked Yi Futian to take a look at it instead. Yi Futian nodded. This Lung Yan was a smart guy. He said, Let me see your blade techniques. Very well. Lung Yan nodded. As his figure flashed, he stepped into the void and suddenly was bursting with an incredibly strong rule power of swordsmanship. Invisible swords condensed and manifested as Lung Yan was gathering momentum. His palms faced up toward the sky as swords suddenly appeared in thin air. The aura from his body continued to rise, as well as getting stronger. The strong sword will made a sharp sound in the void, and an extremely sharp aura enveloped the sky above. When his aura climbed to the highest point, Lung Yan stretched out both hands. Holding a sword, he slashed into the void. In an instant, many blade lights bloomed at the same time, turning into a brilliant blade aurora. They rushed straight into the firmament, intent on splitting the void. And it didn't dissipate until it was well into the distance. Yi Futian looked up and watching quietly. This blade technique was very good, and the rule power it exhibited was strong as well. Definitely on par with him when he himself was in the sage realm back then. Fierce, domineering, and indomitable, completely embodied the essence of the blade technique. Lung Yan landed on the ground after unleashing the sword. As he returned in front of Yi Futian, he said, Sir. Not bad. Yi Futian nodded slightly in acknowledgement. The rule power was unleashed to its fullest. It was fierce and domineering, in line with the way of the blade. However, too much force was exerted, as well as the effort on pursuing the form. Lung Yan was thoughtful. It was as if trying to understand the meaning behind Yi Futian's words. Finally he said, Please expound, sir. A few months ago, I went to the Divine Ocean continent, and encountered the relic left by Thunder Punishing Skylord there. I found that there were carvings of many axe techniques, and some of them were formed naturally, and had not been carved with the power of the Great Path. However, their spirits were far stronger than those carved by the power of the Great Path. After many marks were made, thunder-punishing Skylord was able to break the constraints of the Great Path. Although I haven't reached that state, I did have some insights. Your blade techniques were more insistent on form rather than spirit. It isn't ideal, said Yi Futian. But Leng Yin was still puzzled. There was a huge gap between his and Yi Futian's realm, and same with perception. Some things far surpassed his ability of understanding. Strike me with the sword, Yi Futian said. Very well. Leng Yin nodded, once again gathering the momentum of the sword. Yi Futian's body was covered by a sword will, like a storm tearing through the void. In the next moment, Leng Yin unleashed the sword. The sword slashed directly at Yi Futian without reservation, because he knew that his sword did not pose any threat to Yi Futian. When Yi Futian saw the sword coming, he raised his finger and pointed at the sword. Even Leng Yin felt a little shocked at this moment. From Yi Futian's finger, he didn't notice any aura of the Great Path. Clang! The sword broke. And as the finger fell, a light appeared on the ground where the sword had struck. An invisible sword will, without form, was able to split his sword in two. Leng Yan's arms hung by his sides as he stared in shock. How did this happen? He seemed stunned, just standing there, with continuous flickering in his eyes. Sometimes his brows were knitted, and sometimes they were unfurled. After a while he simply closed his eyes, overcome by extreme tranquility. He momentarily forgot his surroundings. Yi Futian didn't interrupt him. On the other side, Li Changxing and Leng Shi were looking at this side. Previously, he was instructing Leng Shi in cultivation. When he saw Leng Yin in a daze, Li Changxing looked interested. What was going on? Leng Shi didn't even know what had happened. He just stared at Leng Yin puzzled. After a while, there were invisible fluctuations from Leng Yan's body, and some changes seemed to have taken place in his entire person. This change was invisible, and he seemed to be sharper than before. His eyes opened, and he looked at Yi Futian. Slightly bowing, he said, "Thank you, master." Suddenly, the confusions and questions he had about his own cultivations for such a long time cleared up at this moment. It was as if he had found a path to cultivation. He had hoped that Li Changxing would be the one to instruct him, but by chance, Yi Futian took him on. He had gained more than he had expected, and he was grateful. "This is," Li Changxing revealed a smile. "Are you going to be his apprentice?" Yi Futian shook his head and looked at Leng Yin. "I don't have any intention of accepting disciples." "I understand," Leng Yin said. "But receiving instruction from Elder today is a memorable event. I shall always remember it in all my days." Leng Shi was a little surprised. It seemed that Leng Yin had gained a lot. Yi Futian didn't say anything more. "I'm only pointing some things out as I see them. How much you can realize on your own is completely dependent on your own talent. Go back to cultivate and comprehend thoroughly." "Yes, sir." Leng Yin bowed and said, "I will bid my farewell." He left immediately after that. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2012, The Premier Holy Land. Chapter 2012. The Premier Holy Land. After Leng Yin received instruction from Yi Futian, he went back to cultivate. After sitting in meditation for a day, when he emerged from cultivation the next day, his temperament had changed greatly. He had a breakthrough in his cultivation, and his blade techniques were more refined. He had clearly made considerable progress. Even Leng Shi was a little regretful that she didn't ask Yi Futian for help. She was there next to them yesterday, but she had concentrated on Li Changxing's instructions and ignored Yi Futian's instructions to Leng Yin. Although she later asked Leng Yin for details, she couldn't quite understand the ideas that Leng Yin tried to express for some reason. On this day, many members of the Leng family gathered, seemingly waiting for someone's arrival. Outside the family compound, in the void, a group of cultivators arrived by air. Everyone in the group had an extraordinary temperament and an elegant demeanor. Each one of them was a notable figure in their own right. Seeing their appearance, the genius talent who was the lead, Leng Quangxing, revealed a smile. As the group descended, he smiled and said, "Welcome everyone to the Leng family." The elder is too kind. We come this time to trouble you with some business of ours. Please forgive us in advance. Everyone in the group bowed slightly to pay their respect. They were humble and polite. The visitors were all in Runhuang realm, as far as their cultivation was concerned. The empress who stood in the middle of the group was eye-catching both in looks and temperament. She was like a goddess out of this world, and yet, she had a sense of sharpness about her. We are friends here, no need for formality. I think you all know my brother. The woman pointed to Lung Guangxing and introduced him to everyone. She was a lady of the Lung family, the sister of Sky Sword Lung Qinghan. They were my fellow cultivators, Lung Qinghan said to Lung Guangxing. Lung Guangxing knew that, of course, and turned around to gesture. Please everyone. The group walked inside the family compound. The Lung family had already prepared a banquet like the one they had prepared last time, when they hosted the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower, which was a grand feast. The chief of the Lung family was also in attendance. After the two parties greeted each other, they took their seats. Some young members of the family also arrived, including Lung Shi and Lung Yan. However, they could only sit in the back and watch those visitors. They knew exactly where these people came from. However, although everyone was seated, no one moved, and there were still a lot of empty seats left, which seemed to have been prepared for others. Go and ask them to come now, the Lung family chief commanded. Someone immediately bowed and left to follow the order. The people who needed to be invited were naturally referring to the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower. This banquet was, in fact, an opportunity for today's visitors to meet with the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower. Previously, they had already mentioned this to Li Chongxing and Zhong Chan. Before long, the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower came to the banquet site with Yi Futian. Many had visited before, but never with such a grand reception, so he never did come. After all, many had been here to visit Zhong Chan. But this time it was different. The people who came this time were not some ordinary folks, so he wanted to come and see for himself. After Yi Futian and the others arrived, the visitors looked up at them, but sat quietly without moving. Lung Qinghan stood up and greeted them. Lung Qinghan greets all of you. No need to be so formal. Guangxing is our peer, and the Lung family has been friendly with Wangshan Watchtower. So miss, you do not need to be so formal, Li Chongxing said with a smile. Lung Qinghan nodded slightly before sitting down. Li Chongxing and the others sat and glanced at the group of people around Lung Qinghan. They nodded to Li Chongxing and the others. We heard that friends from Wangshan Watchtower were here with the Lung family, so we came with Qinghan to visit, and also to meet you. We have long heard of the fame of Wangshan Watchtower, but rarely had an opportunity to chat. It is a great honor to see everyone today. You are much too kind. Li Chongxing smiled and said, Donghua Academy is famous as the premier holy land in Donghua domain. It is our honor to meet the cultivators from Donghua Academy today. The exchanges of both parties were quite polite, especially those from Li Chongxing. When he spoke, his tone was gentle and even, which had a calming effect. It was as if he was an expert in complimenting the other. Obviously, he was quite experienced in these sorts of things. Those who had arrived were the disciples cultivating at the premier academy of Donghua domain. Donghua Academy bore the name Donghua, so its background needed no further explanation. It had the best cultivation resources of Donghua domain, backed by domain chief's manor. It came into being by order of Donghuang the Great to preach to the world, and grew rapidly. The honorary college chief of Donghua Academy was also the chief of Donghua domain chief's manor. Even the son of domain chief's manor, that peerless talent, was also cultivating at Donghua Academy. Among the three major principalities of Donghua Heavens, the domain chief's manor needed no further introduction. The other two were Donghua Academy and Lingxiao Palace. Except for Lingxiao Palace, the other two were somewhat different in nature. One was a political ruling power of the Donghua domain, while the other was a force in preaching. Furthermore, these two principalities themselves were inextricably linked, as their existences were dependent on the will of the great emperor. The Lung family had produced two genius talents back in the days, and they were brother and sister. After Sky Sword Lung Guangxing traveled throughout the world, He settled down at Wangshan Watchtower and cultivated for several years. On the other hand, his sister Lung Qinghan chose a relatively simple and effective path by cultivating at Donghua Academy. Both Donghua Academy and Wangshan Watchtower were considered major principalities in Donghua domain. But if one were to speak of history, Donghua Academy was clearly a step higher. However, the difference was that the visitors from Donghua Academy did not represent the top figures of Donghua Academy. Those from Wangshan Watchtower were the most elite group of people under the Millet Emperor. Therefore, at best, it was Donghua Academy that came to pay the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower a visit. At this time, the group from Donghua Academy had their eyes on Zongchan, as if to scrutinize him. After Zongchan's breakthrough, there were now 4 awesome figures in Donghua domain under the major figureheads. The one from Donghua Academy needed no other introduction. With a reputation of being the first genius talent of Donghua domain, he was destined to be a true peerless cultivator in talent and background. Aside from that person, Jiang Yueli, the chief disciple of the sword goddess, was the most well-known among them, with a level cultivation in the 8th realm. He was only a step away from giant figures. Some even claimed that Jiang Yueli's strength was no less than those reigning top figures. After that desolation in Zongchan, now some people ranked these 4. The one from Donghua Academy was the first, Jiang Yueli second, Desolation third, and Zongchan fourth. These 4 people would continue in the footsteps of the previous generation and reach the top. Unless they perish before then, such a day would almost be a certainty. Subconsciously, they were comparing Zongchan with that man in their minds. Zongchan's temperament was extraordinary, almost as that of a true master. However, compared to the sense that the other man exuded, it was still quite a ways off. Cultivating in the academy, Zongchan's name was mentioned a lot recently, and now I finally saw him in person, Arun Huang said with a smile. I haven't done anything and don't deserve this fame. And from Donghua Academy no less. I'm embarrassed, Zongchan responded. If it weren't for Qinghan, we wouldn't be able to come here to see you all. Truth be told, there are many cultivators in Donghua Academy who would really like to see you all too. The cultivator from Donghua Academy said with a smile. If you are free, would everyone from Wangshan Watchtower be willing to pay our academy a visit? Li Changxing looked at Zongchan, because those words were directed at him. Yi Futian sat there quietly without speaking, watching everything in silence. With Zongchan here, nothing had to do with him. I have also looked up to Donghua Academy for a long time, and if the opportunity allows, I must visit, Zongchan responded with a smile. After the chief's order, all cultivators are now on their way to Donghua Heavens. Donghua Academy will also be the center of this gathering of unprecedented talents. It is also an important place that you definitely need to visit now that you are here in Donghua Heavens. Zongchan nodded. He did want to go. At this time, Yi Futian heard a voice. What does Brother Yi think? Yi Futian glanced at Li Changxing and thought that Li Changxing was a curious character. He said, Is senior brother referring to these cultivators, or the matter of going to Donghua Academy? Whichever one you think it is, Li Changxing responded with a smile. These cultivators don't understand, and there is nothing more to be said. As for Donghua Academy, I would like to see it, said Yi Futian. Junior brother Yi should go and experience it. Donghua Academy is extraordinary, and has a considerable number of treasures. One of the treasures is a magic mirror that can attest to the rank of the divine wheel of the Great Path. You have several divine wheels. Don't you want to take a closer look? Li Changxing said temptingly. Is it really as incredible as it sounds? Yi Futian showed a look of amazement. Li Changxing nodded. In the divine prefecture, there are the distinction of perfection and imperfection in divine wheels, with no distinction in rank. However, in reality, even the most perfect divine wheels still have ranks. Every cultivator is different, and that mirror can assess the strength of the divine wheel. Countless cultivators have already gone to be examined. Now in Donghua Heavens, and even the entire Donghua domain, the strongest divine will ever tested belonged to the son of the current domain chief. He is also known as the strongest man of his generation. Donghua domain has placed high expectations on him. I was talking to Brother Zong about if we should go and visit when people from Donghua Academy have arrived by themselves. To this Yi Futian nodded. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2013, Chance Encounter. Chapter 2013, Chance Encounter at the banquet. The cultivators from Donghua Academy formally invited Zong Chan and the others for a visit. Li Changxing and Zong Chan both agreed to go. In Yi Futian's estimation, they probably didn't just invite the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower. This time, all forces were about to gather in Donghua Heavens. As the premier holy land of the Donghua domain, Donghua Academy would want to meet the top personalities from every corner. After the banquet, all the cultivators from Donghua Academy and the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower left, except for Leng Qinghan. She was going to accompany the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower to visit Donghua Academy. After all, this was her familial home, and those from Wangshan Watchtower were their guests. Qinghan this time, Donghua Academy did not just invite the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower, did they? Qifeng asked. Leng Qinghan nodded and said, when they learned that the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower were here, they decided to come with me for a visit, and that was the consensus of many cultivators at the academy. They wanted to invite cultivator from all sides to the academy, so they made the proposal. The head of the Leng family nodded. This time it is really a meeting of the minds. Donghua Academy is the premier holy land, and everyone will accept the invitation. I think they are very interested in Zong Chan. And Zong Chan must be very interested in him. Leng Qinghan thought about that person for a moment. Although Zong Chan was extremely talented and had cast the perfect divine wheel of Upper Ren Huang, there was still quite a big gap between the two. She did not think that there was anyone who could compare with the person they are referring to. In the Donghua domain, he was the one and only, and this was the consensus of all the cultivators in Donghua Heavens. It was the same even for the chief disciple of the sword goddess from the fluttering snow palace. The cultivators of Donghua Academy knew how much glory he had brought them. In their view, of the four top figures in Donghua domain, he was at one level while the other three were at another. In addition to Zong Chan, Li Changshan of Wangshan Watchtower is also very powerful. Since we are talking about talent, have you noticed that white-haired young man? Qifeng asked. Naturally. Leng Qinghan nodded. The news of him defeating Ling He has already spread to Donghua Academy. Ling He was a member of Lingxiao Palace, and also cultivated at Donghua Academy. He was considered a disciple of the academy. Lingxiao Palace was considered a familial principality, while Donghua Academy was considered a holy place for preaching. There was no conflict of interest. Even the son of the chief went there for cultivation. Qifeng nodded. He is also very powerful. In Donghua Academy, his battle record is difficult for anyone to match. Leng Qinghan, who disagreed with this statement, retorted, Ling He is outstanding. If he can defeat Ling He must be a top-notch character, but there are still a few people who are superior to Ling He in the academy. He isn't as powerful as all that. It was extremely high praise for Clan Lord Leng to say that no one could compare to Yi Futian. It suggested that besides that man, almost no one could match Yi Futian's talent. She, who was cultivating at Donghua Academy, thought this was an exaggeration of sorts. After this time, we should be able to see, Chief Leng said with a smile. Emperor Yi is indeed extremely powerful, a voice said. Leng Qinghan looked at the speaker. When she saw who it was, she smiled and said, Leng Yen, your cultivation has improved? Auntie, Leng Yen nodded. Under the guidance of Emperor Yi, I had an epiphany and made some progress in cultivation. No wonder. Leng Qinghan smiled. Of course, I believed in the strength of Emperor Yi too. After all, Ling He is also a powerful man in the Donghua Heavens. Leng Yin didn't argue with her. He could see that even though his aunt recognized Yi Futian's strength, she didn't think he could be raised to another level, such as at the same level as Zhongchan. Of course, this was not surprising. After all, Zhongchan was now upper Renhuang with perfect great path, on his way to becoming a pillar in the domain. This fact was evident from the attitude exhibited by the cultivators who had visited these days, including the cultivators of Donghua Academy. Today, the four great individuals were well known to everyone in the entire Donghua domain. Not only their talent but their strength had also reached the topmost level. They were now able to fight against the existence of Renhuang Ninth Realm. A few days later, at the time they agreed upon, the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower and Donghua Academy arrived. They came in the cold early morning hours at the place where Li Changxing and the others had been cultivating. Miss Lung, Li Changxing and Zhongchan walked out together, with Yi Futian and his party following behind. Lung Qinghan nodded slightly at them and said, "Are we ready to go?" "Yes, please." Li Changxing nodded. "I will lead the way for everyone." With a flash of her figure, Lung Qinghan stepped into the void in one step. Li Changxing and others followed behind her. Sky Sword Lung Quangxing was also accompanying them, because he was considered a member of Wangshan Watchtower. There were cultivators in the sky above Donghua heavens, and many of them were very powerful Renhuang. Countless cultivators had descended on this continent these days to usher in the most prosperous period the region had seen in 50 years. "Miss Lung, what level of cultivation is the vice chief now?" Li Changxing walked to Lung Qinghan and asked. There was not much news about the son of the domain chief of Donghua domain, and no one knew whether he had broken through the realm or not. "We don't know for sure. He should be at the pinnacle of the 7th realm. After all, it hasn't been long since the vice chief's breakthrough in the 7th realm," Lung Qinghan replied. Among the four figures, Jiang Yueli, the chief disciple of the sword goddess, had the highest cultivation and achieved fame the earliest. Jiang Yueli was also hailed as the person most likely to inherit the position of Lord of Fluttering Snow Palace, although there were two other peerless goddesses right after her, Qin Qing and Chu Hanxi. "Has he been cultivating at Donghua Academy?" Li Changxing continued to ask. "As far as I know, he should be cultivating in a secret location inside the academy. No one knows his progress. However, he should show up for the feast of Donghua domain this time," Lung Qinghan said. As the man's cultivation level elevated, there were not many opportunities for Donghua Academy's disciples to see him. He was quite mysterious. Some elders had mentioned that he was cultivating in a secret location inside the academy. Li Changxing nodded. Donghua Academy was the premier academy in Donghua domain. It was not some ordinary place. There were many treasures inside, many secret locations for cultivation, as well as a library. "I look forward to meeting this legendary figure," Li Changxing smiled and said. He didn't have the opportunity to cast the perfect divine wheel himself, but he was rather envious of people like Zhongchan, who would be qualified to pursue the supreme realm in the future. "This time coming to Donghua heavens, we should be able to meet him," Lung Qinghan said as Li Changxing nodded. With so many extraordinary figures of the entire Donghua domain converged in one place, he was bound to show up sooner or later, and the chief would not be tucking him away either. The group continued on their way. Even though they were both within the bounds of Donghua heavens, Donghua Academy was still quite a distance away from the Lung family. The Donghua heavens was just too vast of an area. After a while the group from far away saw a mountain gate. It was like a heavenly palace, towering and magnificent. In front of it was a massive open space with no other buildings. This area was unique and belonged solely to this celestial gate. "We are here," Lung Qinghan said. The group descended and landed on the stairs. At Donghua Academy, the gates alone were hundreds of meters high, giving its visitors a sense of solemnity. Ordinary folks had to climb thousands of steps before they could reach it. However, as Lung Qinghan was a cultivator of Donghua Academy, and Wangshan Watchtower was the guest, they could reach the gate straight away. At this moment, someone groaned and retreated. It was a Run Huang from Wangshan Watchtower. He looked a little embarrassed, and Lung Qinghan guessed what happened immediately. She said, "Aside from the disciples, there are many elders who are cultivating inside the academy, and they don't like anyone to snoop. Please don't release your divine consciousness inside the academy. Your understanding is appreciated. The man nodded and said apologetically, I was careless. Let's go, said Lung Qinghan. At this moment, there was a cracking sound in the air from behind. They turned and saw another group approaching them, and it was a group of goddesses. They were all outstanding in looks, especially the three in the lead. They were more stunning than the rest. Futian had seen them before. They were the cultivators from Fluttering Snow Palace. The three in the front were the three disciples of the sword goddess, Jiang Yueli, Qing Qing and Chu Hanxi. They also saw the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower, and slightly bowed with their hands together. Li Changsheng and the others responded in kind as they exchanged greetings. Friends from Wangshan Watchtower are here too, Jiang Yueli said as Li Changsheng nodded. Donghua Academy is well known throughout the world. How could we pass it up? But we didn't expect to meet the goddesses here. What a happy coincidence. Indeed, it's meant to be. Jiang Yueli nodded. Previously, at the Divine Ocean continent, my junior sister had met Emperor Yi in front of the cliff, and now we meet again here. Qin Qing smiled at Yi Futian, and nodded when she heard those words, completely different from the icy arrogance that Yi Futian had experienced when he first met her. Yi Futian returned a smile and nodded in acknowledgement. Ha 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 ha, it is. Let's go in together, Li Changxing said with a smile. Very well, please. Jiang Yueli gestured with her hand. Goddesses, please. Li Changxing took a polite step back. Seeing this, Jiang Yueli didn't demur any longer. She walked next to Li Changxing and the others and said, Let's go in together. With that said, both sides entered Donghua Academy. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2014, Estrangement. Chapter 2014, Estrangement. Donghua Academy was the best educational institution in the Donghua domain. No other academies could compare. Likewise, those that cultivated there were the most excellent cultivators, not some beginners or intermediate cultivators. Unless some unusually enchanting characters were chosen by the Academy's great figures to be taught by their sides and personally overseeing their cultivation, the minimum level for potential disciples in Donghua Academy was the Saint Realm. Those in the Saint Realm had already transcended the ordinary and moved into sainthood, proving that they could shed their roots from the world, thus allowing them to pass through the threshold of Donghua Academy. This premier academy in Donghua was not here to cultivate its future generations, but to cultivate top-notch individuals who would be qualified to rule Donghua heavens in the future. Those who came out of Donghua Academy were generally already at the top of Donghua domain, whose cultivations were extraordinary. Yi Futian and the others stepped into Donghua Academy. This academy was different from all the other academies that Yi Futian had been to before. In other academies, their many disciples could be seen walking around everywhere on campus. But Donghua Academy was different. They didn't see many disciples milling around. For disciples in this realm, they spent most of their time cultivating, rather than wandering leisurely around the academy. Furthermore, this academy was like a city, boundless and massive. Inside the academy, and looking into the distance, many magnificent ancient temples were built on top of an ancient peak. Immortal spirits abound with waterfalls and flowy clouds. One could even catch a glimpse of some sacred beasts. Looking up, there were islands floating with buildings on them. They were the palaces in which powerful men cultivated. Among the clouds and mist, it truly resembled an earthly wonderland. Yi Futian was a little emotional. This was the top academy in Divine Prefecture. It was like a place for the divines to cultivate. The power of the Great Path lifted up those floating islands, and the aura of the Great Path was everywhere, permeating throughout the vast and endless Donghua Academy. In the distance, there was a range of vast and endless divine mountains, full of mystery. Yi Futian knew that there were many secret cultivation locations inside that ordinary people would never reach. Donghua Academy had the best cultivation resources within the Donghua domain. The general background of the establishment of this academy originated from Dong Huang the Great's desire to preach. It could be said that the supporting force behind it was the great emperor, with the full support of the domain chief's manor. In just a few hundred years, the first academy in Donghua domain had been established. Yi Futian was not the only one who had come here for the first time. In fact, most of those who entered the academy now were here for the first time. They were rather thoughtful when they saw the sight in front of them. No wonder that Ren Huang from Wangshan Watchtower wanted to poke around with his divine consciousness before. He must have been curious, but it had caused powerful individuals in the academy to feel averse to this. A great place. No wonder it's the #1 holy land of Donghua domain. Li Changxing said with a smile, unreserved in his praise. Wangshan Watchtower was created by his master, the Millet Emperor, once upon a time. The only place that could be considered as a secret place was that watchtower, which was still quite a distance away in its reputation from Donghua Academy, which had an extraordinary background. The foundation of Wangshan Watchtower in comparison was not as great. Paradise on earth. Cultivating at a place like this must be refreshing. Jiang Yueli expressed her sentiment. I heard that the fluttering snow palace is located in an extremely harsh and cold environment, which has snowfalls all year round, but it also serves as training to one's character. Is that true? Li Changxing asked. Jiang Yueli nodded. Yes, the cultivation environment of Fluttering Snow Palace is comparable to that of the Desolate God Palace, the worst environment in the Donghua domain to cultivate. But it had also nurtured many goddesses. The palace lord herself is worthy of being an outstanding woman in Donghua domain, praised Li Changxing. The sword goddess was definitely a legend in Donghua domain. Where are we going? Li Changxing turned to look at Lung Qinghan and asked. There. Lung Qinghan pointing ahead, where there were many floating islands in the void, standing there like temples. Among the many floating islands, one was the most conspicuous. A palace, towering into the firmament, stood upon it, as if it were a temple connecting to the heavens. Li Changxing's eyes drifted there, and his assessment was sharp as his eyes penetrated the space. He looked at the temple and whispered, Is this Donghua Pavilion? Lung Qinghan nodded. When the great emperor unified the land of divine prefecture, he also established book depositories. I heard that 2 such book depositories were established in Donghua Heavens, one in the domain chief's manor, and the other in Donghua Academy. What's the difference between these 2 book depositories? Li Changxing asked. Yi Futian showed a look of interest. After he came to Divine Prefecture, the first place he really settled in was Dongyuan Pavilion. At that time, he already knew that every continent in Divine Prefecture had such a holy land, and Donghua Heavens was no exception. Donghua Heavens seemed to be quite unique in that it had 2 book depositories, one located in Domain Chief's Manor, and one in Donghua Academy. The one at Domain Chief's Manor is more comprehensive, while the one in Donghua Academy is more suited for high-level cultivators above the Saint Realm. It was not open to outsiders, so its user base is smaller than the one at Domain Chief's Manor, Lung Qinghan explained. Li Changxing nodded. Only the Donghua Academy disciples had the opportunity to access the book depository at Donghua Academy, and there were not many of them. Let's go, Lung Qinghan said and immediately stepped into the void, heading in that direction. The 2 principalities followed her, and soon came to this floating island. Of course, there was more than just the depository, but this book depository was the most obvious structure on the island. On this floating island, there were many palatial compounds and a giant open area. At this time, many cultivators were gathered, forming a lively scene. It was quite different from the deserted area outside of Donghua Academy when they first arrived. When Yi Futian and the others arrived, they saw some familiar faces. The cultivators of the ancient royal family of Yin were already there. Their prince, Yin Hanxing and Yin Dongyang, were both present. Aside from them, Yi Futian also saw the cultivators from Ling Shao Palace. Ling He was there also, chatting up the cultivators of the ancient royal family of Yin. It seemed that the 2 were quite amicable. Seeing this, coldness flashed across Yi Futian's eyes. Last time, on Turtle Deity Island, The cultivators of Lingxiao Palace plotted against them when they clashed with the ancient royal family of Yan. He found their close proximity this time intriguing. Moreover, he was extremely disgusted with Ling He and still wanted him dead. However, in Donghua Heavens, he couldn't possibly do anything of the sort. The cultivators of Lingxiao Palace and Yan's ancient royal family also turned to look at them, squinting slightly. Ling He's malice toward Yi Futian had only gotten stronger since their last battle. As long as Yi Futian was around, he would never be able to raise his head. When he saw Yi Futian walking together with the cultivators from Fluttering Snow Palace, Ling He felt even more upset. But he quickly concealed his emotions and looked at the cultivators of Fluttering Snow Palace. Greetings to all the goddesses. Jiang Yueli and the others nodded slightly. Ling He looked at Qin Qing and said, Qin Qing, I heard that you would come, so I arrived a little earlier. Finally, I am meeting you. You're too kind. Qin Qing nodded in acknowledgement. Obviously, she was grateful that Lingxiao Palace had deliberately befriended them over the years. Ling He and had always maintained a good relationship with them. However, she had felt a little uncomfortable at Turtle Deity Island previously. She understood that Ling He was proud and narcissistic, but other than that, she suddenly felt that Lingxiao Palace had an ulterior motive for approaching them. They did not simply want to forge a good relationship with them. He seemed to have felt the distance in Qin Qing's tone. Ling He's desire to kill Yi Futian was much stronger. The cultivators of the ancient royal family of Yan also looked at Jiang Yueli and the others. Yan Hanqing said, It was a hasty meeting that day on Turtle Deity Island. Although I met the goddesses, we did not have a chance to talk at length. I have long admired Goddess Jiang, and this time, in Donghua Heavens, I must implore the goddess for some instruction. The prince is too indulgent. We are at the same level of cultivation, so there is no instruction to speak of, Jiang Yueli responded. Of course there is, and the gap is considerable, said Yan Hanqing. His cultivation was in the 9th realm, and was actually higher than Jiang Yueli. However, Jiang Yueli's great path was perfect, which was not something he could compete with. Therefore, unless he broke through the shackles of Renhuang, it would be difficult for him to beat Jiang Yueli. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2015, Holy Land Scenery. Chapter 2015, Holy Land Scenery. At that moment, a group of people walked over from nearby. All of them were incredibly impressive. They were cultivators from Donghua Academy, and every one of them was a top figure. The man at their head seemed to be about 40 or 50 years old, and had the air of a grandmaster. He looked at those around him, then smiled and said, I would never have thought that I would have the chance to see so many young heroes from all the continents of the Donghua domain come here. I am Lu Qingzhu, and I welcome you. So you are Lu Qingzhu. Greetings. Li Changxing and the others bowed. Many of them had heard the name Lu Qingzhu, as he was one of the great figures of the Donghua domain. It was said that he had cultivated to the top of the Renhuang Plain, and was probably only a step away from breaking free of the bonds of the Great Path. His understanding of the Great Path was profound. He was the most important figure at Donghua Academy. The academy is a holy land, so there is no need for me to entertain all of you. But why don't we take a walk around the academy? Said Lu Qingzhu with a smile. Everyone nodded, saying, We have great admiration for the fame of the Donghua Academy, so we came to visit. It would be perfect if we could take a walk around and see the scenery. Very good. I will be your guide today. Please follow me, said Lu Qingzhu, suddenly turning and walking away. When they came in front of the ancient temple that soared into the sky, he said, This is Donghua Pavilion, which I'm sure you already knew. It is a library with many scrolls inside. Many of them were written under the orders of the great emperor many years ago, and are classics. However, we do not show them to the outside world. I hope you understand. Everyone nodded. They were not disciples of Donghua Academy, and thus they could not enter Donghua Pavilion. However, there are many other wonderful places here at the academy where you may go. I will take you to see them, continued Lu Qingzhu. And he turned and walked in another direction. All the cultivators followed him. At some point, Ling He came up beside Qin Qing and said, "The academy is truly all-encompassing. There are many hidden treasures here. Other than a few restricted areas, we are free to go anywhere." Qin Qing nodded. Donghua Academy is the foremost holy land for cultivation in the Donghua domain. The conditions for cultivation are perfect here, which has made many people envious. No wonder people say that most of the people of the domain chief's manor, in the Donghua domain, came out of Donghua Academy. The domain chief's manor had a very close relationship with Donghua Academy. Many of the cultivators who came out of the academy joined the domain chief's manor and became members. This was equivalent to serving the emperor himself, giving you a chance to reach a high level. If this had been earlier, Ling He naturally would have bragged a little, but now he had no grounds on which to do so. After all, even though he was a cultivator of Donghua Academy, he had been badly beaten by Futian. If the other cultivators of Ling Xiao Palace had not intervened, things would probably have been even worse for him. The group soared through the sky above the academy. There were floating islands in the vast space all around. Lu Qingzhu introduced them to the group, saying, "These floating islands are where the elders of the academy go to cultivate, as well as many of the disciples of the academy. However, it is challenging for a student to claim one of these islands for their cultivation spot. They can only do so after passing a tough test. There are vast matrices on the islands that make them both good for cultivation and difficult to attack. Since these matrices cover them, one's divine consciousness cannot invade them." Everyone nodded. This was an unparalleled atmosphere for cultivation. Could one person really occupy an entire island by themselves and use it for their cultivation? However, this was something that only the most powerful of figures could hope to do. Ordinary disciples would never get that chance. They passed through that area and came to another area with ancient mountain peaks arranged in a ring. There was a vast distance between the peaks, which was filled with a vast matrix and a tall terrace. People were sparring there on the terrace. This is the path-seeking stage of the academy. Students come here from time to spar. And sometimes we hold ceremonies here, continued Lu Qingzhu. Everyone began thinking about this. With so many heroic figures gathered together, how could they not think of sparring with each other? "Look over there," said Lu Qingzhu, pointing. Between two relatively close peaks, there was an incomparably huge ancient mirror, clear and silent. If one did not look at it carefully, it would be easy to overlook its very existence. The divine mirror of heavenly wheels. It can determine how strong one's wheel of the great path is, and it looks at everyone. In the world of cultivation, there are only two types of wheels, perfect and imperfect. One cannot divide perfect wheels into levels, but are some still stronger than others? Lu Qingzhu said, seemingly speaking to himself. Of course some are. Everyone's wheels of the great path have different amounts of strength, and the gaps between some are actually quite large. However, since they are perfect, this is impossible to see once one can only faintly sense it, as there is no concrete display. But here, the divine mirror of heavenly wheels can distinguish the strength of wheels of the great path. It is a valuable treasure. I am not sure where it came from, but if one unleashes their wheel of the great path before it, the mirror will activate. A divine halo will appear within it. According to our best guesses, the mirror has 9 wheels of light. However, no one has ever made it display all of them, so this is only a guess. Some people say this guess is wrong, and it is absolutely impossible to make that many rings of light appear. His words made everyone feel rather excited. Many people wanted to go and try it out. What is the most amount of light rings that has ever appeared? Someone asked. Everyone looked at Lu Qingzhu. They had obviously all been wanting to know the answer to that question, and so they looked at him curiously. 6 rings, said Lu Qingzhu with a smile. Because of this, many people think that 9 is impossible, and that 6 is perhaps the maximum number of rings for a divine wheel, or maybe 7. Was it the vice chief? Asked Jiang Yueli. Yes, said Lu Qingzhu with a nod. This was not a secret. All the cultivators of the academy had been tested. Jiang Yueli looked over at the mirror. And not only her. Most of them wanted to go and try. They wanted to see how many rings of light their divine will could produce. It seems you are all thinking the same thing. But you must first take some time to prepare your minds. Moreover, if your divine wheel is not perfect, there will be no response from the divine mirror of heavenly wheels. Lu Qingzhu reminded them. Many people hesitated, but among them, there were those with perfect divine wheels, like Ling He, Qin Qing, Yin Dongyang and others. But they were only mid-level renhuangs. Let us first go visit other places. You have all come from afar, so you should enjoy the academy's scenery. Let us return and then decide where you want to go back to, said Lu Qingzhu smiling. He was doing his best to be a good host. After all, these guests had come from far away. Everyone appreciated this, and so they followed him into the depths of the academy. This place could not be seen from the outside. It was mysterious and unpredictable. It was a vast area that stretched for thousands of miles. It could even have been said to be a great city, but it was just a fact that Donghua Academy occupied a huge area. What is this place? It is so beautiful, said Qin Qing, looking down at the place. That place was like a sea of flowers as countless brilliant buds bloomed. There were pavilions and terraces surrounded by flowers, as well as rock gardens and lakes. It was like a land of celestials among the world of mortals. This is a place where the elders of the academy cultivate, said Ling He. Not everyone was cultivating on the floating islands up above. There were many elders of the academy here as well. Qin Qing looked down. What kind of people would be cultivating in a place as beautiful as this? Not all of the top figures of Donghua Academy were familiar to outsiders. Many of them reside within quiet and unassuming, just cultivating at the academy. Within the sea of flowers in front of one of the pavilions, Qin Qing could see a group of figures. They were a little different than she had imagined. There was an old woman there with white hair and a weathered face. But she stood straight. She was incredibly calm. It was as if she existed in a place outside the world. There are many elders purifying themselves in this area. We will not disturb them, said Lu Qingzhu. Everyone nodded and continued forward. Before long, they saw another peculiar structure. It seemed to be a celestial palace made of glass, perfect and beautiful. Going forward, the sky between the ancient peaks was filled with marvelous sword will. They saw a black-robed figure sitting on a cliff meditating with his eyes closed. He was on a sword peak. Yi Futian's heart was filled with wonder as he went along. It seemed that any of the heroes of Donghua Academy would be considered a top figure in the world outside. This place truly completely overshadowed Wangshan Watchtower. Brother, do outsiders truly not know about these people? He asked Li Changxing telepathically. Of them do, and some of them don't. But if you think about it carefully, there is nothing strange about this. Before Dong Huang the Great conquered the divine prefecture, during the time of chaos, there were already countless heroes. Many of those ancients are still around, but where are they? Naturally, they went all over. Donghua Academy is a holy land, so having many of this kind of people here is only natural, Li Changxing said to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded. If people of the Run Huang did not die in battle, they would live as long as the sun and moon. These old people had clearly lived long lives. After all, this place was not the original realm. The divine prefecture was vast. Within its infinite reaches, who could count how many cultivators there were? At that point they came to a barren. It was a dark area, with not a single sound. All was quiet. The ground itself was black. An ash-filled wind swept up into the sky, carrying its silent aura with it. Everyone felt most uncomfortable. A terrible storm appeared before them. There was an incomparably huge, ancient black bell within the storm. As they drew near the bell, many people trembled in their hearts. It's so terrifying. Everyone looked up at it. The horrible storm reached up into the clouds. The whole area seemed like a world that had faced the apocalypse. This is the God-burying bell, Lu Qingzhu told them. Here, you can cultivate and temper your spiritual willpower, while cultivating the great path of death, and the power of sonic waves. When the bell rings out, every living thing in a 1,000-mile circle that cannot block it will be shattered and destroyed. This is a precious artifact, but it has not rung for a very long time. I hope it will never ring again. Everyone knew what he meant. If a time ever came when they had to ring the bell, it would mean that Donghua Academy was facing a grave disaster. That was the only reason they would use it. At that time, it would be impossible to guess how many people would die. That was why he had said he hoped it would never ring again. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2016. Seeking the Path in the Academy. Chapter 2016. Seeking the Path in the Academy, let's go, Lu Qingzhu said. He then led the crowd to another area. As they entered deeper inside, the space became even more unfathomable. They would occasionally encounter cultivators from the academy, yet the space above them was completely sealed off. In the distance, there was a desolate piece of land that was blocked off by mountain ranges. The other side of the mountain range was covered in mist. Yi Futian and the others could faintly hear a sound coming from beyond the mist. What is that? Qing Qing asked as she peered into the mountain range. Through the mist, she could faintly make out an enormous skyscraping tower. It seemed taller than a mountain. On the tower, countless runes were lit up. It was as though divine light was penetrating the mist. The crowd could see the strange phenomenon from afar. A faint but terrifying aura emanated from the direction of the tower. The faint sound was also coming from there. That tower is also a treasure, Lu Qingzhu said. He did not explain more as he continued heading in the direction of the tower. That is a restricted area, Ling he said to Qing Qing in a low voice. He also seemed to be reminding the others. The crowd immediately acted more reserved and did not look in the tower's direction. Since it was a restricted area, investigating it was naturally not allowed. However, their curiosity grew even stronger. They wanted to know what was inside. Of course, some of them roughly guessed what was inside. Elder brother, there seems to be demonic qi coming from there, Yi Futian said to Li Changxing over transmitted thoughts. He sensed the demonic qi emanating from there. It seemed that the sealing power of the tower could not completely seal off the qi. A strange look flashed past Li Changxing's eyes. He had also cultivated for many years and had decades of experience. Having lived for so long, he had seen many things and knew more. Some things could only be known by experiencing them firsthand. The rumors that came after could not be easily discerned. It might be a demon sealing tower, Li Changxing said. It is used to suppress powerful demons. Yi Futian revealed a strange look. Why did Donghua Academy need to suppress a powerful demon? However, Li Changxing did not say any more, so Yi Futian did not ask. As they continued on their way, they saw another divine tree. The branches of this divine tree extended outwards, forming a huge forest. The terrifying destructive power of the Great Path was actually contained within the forest. This caused Yi Futian to reveal a bizarre look. Trees represented life and rich life force. However, the tree before him seemed to contain the power of destruction. It is a deadwood. It already has a spirit, said someone. As we continue forward, this region still has many secret zones. Would all of you be interested in taking a look around? Before the crowd managed to respond, a loud sound suddenly came from afar. They turned around and gazed into the distance. Lu Qingzhu released his will and extended it outwards. Very soon, he saw where the commotion had come from. The others looked towards him. After all, it was not convenient for them to release their wills. They did not know what was happening. The cultivators from Desolate God Palace have arrived. They are at the divine mirror of heavenly wheels at the path-seeking stage, Lu Qingzhu explained. The crowd revealed strange looks. Had the cultivators from Desolate God Palace, who usually kept to themselves, also come to Donghua Academy? Before this, the Academy members did not wait for the cultivators from the Desolate God Palace to arrive. That meant that the former did not know that the other party would come here. Now they seem to have come uninvited. Let's go take a look, someone said. They were also very interested in the divine mirror of heavenly wheels. What did the cultivators from Desolate God Palace want over at the path-seeking stage? All right. Lu Qingzhu nodded his head. The group immediately turned around and headed back at very high speeds. It wasn't just them. Many people in the region had heard the commotion. In Donghua Academy, many cultivators were traversing through the air, walking out from the mountain range below, or floating down from the floating islands above. They were all headed in the same direction. Not long after, the cultivators arrived at the path-seeking stage. Ancient peaks towering into the clouds above encircled the path-seeking stage. Over on one side, a group of cultivators dressed in black robes was standing there. They had frightening auras. The pressure that radiated from them was suffocating. On the mountain peak across from them stood the cultivators from Donghua Academy. In between them, above the path-seeking stage, two renhuangs were currently engaged in combat. Their battle was intense. Lu Qingzhu immediately headed over to where the cultivators from Donghua Academy stood. The other cultivators dashed off in different directions. Yi Futian and the cultivators from the Wangshan Watchtower landed on a mountain peak. The cultivators of Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow chose another, while the cultivators from Lingxiao Palace in the Donghua Heavens chose a mountain peak beside them. All of them stood at different locations. At that moment, the sound of a violent collision could be heard. The matrix surrounding the path-seeking stage lit up with brilliant light, blocking off the residue shockwaves of the attacks of the two renhuangs. The cultivator from Donghua Academy was knocked back. He appeared somewhat pathetic. They are actually having a law battle, the crowd thought as they revealed strange looks on their faces. Lu Qingzhu looked at them and said, "Members of Desolate God Palace, why didn't you tell us that you were coming? We could have been more hospitable. No need to go to such troubles. It makes no difference if we just come over unannounced. Please forgive the intrusion," replied an elder of the Desolate God Palace. "You are all guests who have come from afar. Not long ago, I brought the other guests on a tour around the place. Now that the cultivators from Desolate God Palace have arrived, how can I help you? Feel free to ask me for anything," Lu Qingzhu said politely. "You can help me in anything," said a voice as a cold, indifferent and arrogant aura spread out. The crowd shifted their gazes towards the person who had spoken. It was the top monstrous figure of Desolate God Palace, the next Desolate God Desolation. He was renowned as the successor of the current Desolate God. "I cannot promise anything, but I will naturally aid you in any way I can," replied Lu Qingzhu, not paying heed to Desolation's tone. Lu Qingzhu smiled casually. He was actually curious as to what request the other party would make. Desolation stood on the high peak. His black robes fluttered in the wind. His gaze was extremely sharp as it landed on Lu Qingzhu. Even though Lu Qingzhu was a senior figure, Desolation did not respect him. He said, "Today, we have come to the path-seeking stage of Donghua Academy to challenge Ninghua." Ninghua was the top monstrous existence in the Donghua domain, the most prominent figure of this generation of the Donghua domain. He was the vice chief of Domain Chief's Manor. He had too many titles and legends associated with him. Desolation had actually come to Donghua Academy to seek Ninghua. However, this was somewhat understandable. Desolation from Desolate God Palace was also a powerful figure. Ordinary cultivators would most likely be unworthy of meeting Desolation. There were multitudes of cultivators from Donghua Academy. However, only a few of them were qualified to exchange blows with Desolation. He had come specifically for Ninghua, the vice chief of the Donghua domain. Lu Qingzhu smiled and said, "Currently, we do not even know where Ninghua is cultivating at. If you encounter him, you can challenge him then." Lu Qingzhu immediately directed this request to Ninghua himself. Of course, the precursor was that the other party had to find Ninghua. Whether or not Ninghua would oblige Desolation's request, that was up to the former to decide. However, Desolation, who had come from afar, would most likely be left disappointed. Currently, no one could find Ninghua unless he himself decided to appear. Many people in the academy believed that Desolation was somewhat arrogant. Although Desolation was currently also known as one of the four most prominent figures in the Donghua domain, in their eyes, the difference between him and Ninghua was still too great. Regardless of the list Ninghua was ranked in, he was usually at the very top. That included the current four most prominent figures in the Donghua domain. Ninghua was still undisputedly the first. If that is the case, then today, having come to the holy land of Donghua Academy, I wish to experience the way of the cultivators of the academy, Desolation continued. His tone was extremely arrogant and insolent. The cultivators from Donghua Academy felt that his attitude was extremely unsatisfying. This Desolation was practically presumptuous. Since Ninghua was not around, he actually wanted to challenge the cultivators of the academy. His great path was flawless. Even in the academy, how many disciples could challenge him? There would most likely only be a few in the entire academy. Desolation's personality was apparent from this. The cultivators of Desolate God Palace had come to Donghua Academy to challenge the other cultivators and challenge their egos. All right. If that is the case, we will happily oblige. A few Renhuangs answered one after another. They were cultivators from Donghua Academy. They also wanted to see how powerful this monster from Desolate God Palace was. The atmosphere on the mountain peaks surrounding the path-seeking stage immediately became extremely tense. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2017, Finger of Death. Chapter 2017, Finger of Death. In Donghua Academy, people were hurrying over, one after another. They stood on the mountaintops and looked at the virtuosos of the Desolate God Palace. These people were all not friendly. However, they were not too concerned about this. The purpose of inviting all of these factions to Donghua Academy this time was to understand the extent of the cultivation of the various Renhuangs in the Donghua domain. It was just as well that the situation was like this. The space around the peak that Desolation stood upon was especially tight. A dense shadow shrouded the space around the mountain. Black tendrils swirled around, creating a feeling of desolation and destruction. It was a very uncomfortable aura. Since Ninghua is not around, is there anyone from the Donghua Academy who wants to fight me? Desolation asked. His voice reverberated in the entire space, and his tone was extremely overbearing. After all, this was Donghua Academy, the top academy in the entire Donghua domain. And yet Desolation behaved in such an arrogant manner. In the space a distance away, several people were standing at the edge of the many floating islands and observing this area around the ancient peaks of path-seeking. The heir to Desolate God was one of the foremost talked about figures in the entire Donghua domain. Naturally, many people wanted to see just how strong the Desolation of this generation was. In the outer world, among the four of them, Ninghua was ranked first, Jiang Yueli second, Desolation third, and Zhong Chan of Wangshan Watchtower, who had broken through to the high Renhuang level not long ago, was ranked last. Even though Desolation was cocky, everyone was still looking forward to seeing just how strong this impossibly powerful figure from the Desolate God Palace was. The Desolate God Palace was located on the Badlands continent in the Donghua domain. It was very far from the central region of the Donghua domain. The various factions were all from different continents, and so even though they had all heard of one another before, only a few knew of their exact strength. After all, there were very few occasions where they would all gather. Now that the various factions were all called over to the Donghua Heavens by the Manor Chief, why wouldn't they be eager? Jiang Yueli, Qin Qing, and the rest of the practitioners from the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow had all focused their sights over there, excited about Desolation's fight. At that moment, a high-level Renhuang virtuoso walked out from Donghua Academy. He was a middle-aged man at the 8th Renhuang level. Even though he was not one of the top-tier figures in the academy, Desolation was only a level 7 Renhuang. Even though he had a perfect great path, the academy did not wish to send out a level 9 Renhuang, a top-tier figure, straight away. Thus it was he who walked out. Several practitioners of the Donghua Academy nodded lightly when they saw him walk out. This was an acceptable decision, albeit a risky one, since the person he was facing was Desolation. Please, the level 8 virtuoso spoke to Desolation, who was on the mountain peak. Desolation's body glided forward, and came to the space above the path-seeking stage. He did not look at his opponent, but instead faced the region between the two ancient peaks. There lay a transparent mirror. Ripples seemed to course through the mirror continuously. It was the divine mirror of heavenly wheels. Before the practitioners of the Donghua Academy sought their path here, if they possessed a perfect great path, they would all appraise the levels of their divine wheels, using the divine mirror of heavenly wheels to gauge how strong their divine wheels were. When Desolation walked out, he wanted to know how many layers of divine light his own divine wheel could cause the divine mirror of heavenly wheels to emit. The practitioner from Donghua Academy, who challenged him, only looked at him silently without disturbing him. Nor did he walk up. After all, his great path was not perfect, so the divine mirror of heavenly wheels would not respond to him. There was thus no need for him to go up to appraise his divine wheel. Right from the start, he was already disadvantaged. How strong do you think Desolation's divine wheel is? Many people stared at Desolation. Wisps of powerful aura emitted from him. Above his body, a jet-black ancient tree of the Great Way appeared. Its roots seemed to be anchored everywhere, as though it were going to shroud the entire vast space. In an instant, the divine mirror radiated his body. In the mirror, a tree also appeared. It was a jet-black tree. Divine light shrouded Desolation's body, the mirror, and he seemed to be connected as one. Divine light appeared on the divine mirror, and one layer of divine light flowed. Many people turned to stare in that direction. It has appeared. Everyone stared at the divine mirror, and very quickly, a second layer of divine light flowed around the ancient tree. Furthermore, it had still not yet stopped. When the third layer of divine light flowed, many practitioners in the Donghua Academy let out light sounds. Some people were discussing it. 3 wheels. From afar, many people were also watching. It was not that 3 wheels of divine light were strong. However, according to what they know, this was not Desolation's most powerful divine wheel. He had 2 main divine wheels. In the Desolate God Palace, the Desolation of every generation must accomplish one thing: to forge the Desolation wheel. That was Desolation's core divine wheel. This ancient tree already caused 3 layers of divine light to be emitted. This meant that his Desolation wheel would certainly surpass 3 layers of divine light. Indeed, after the 3rd layer of divine light, the radiance on the divine mirror of heavenly wheels stopped flowing. However, Desolation did not stop moving. An even stronger aura emanated from him. A seemingly ancient and sacred aura descended. One could vaguely sense a will of limitless desolation from him. A black divine palace of desolation appeared. It seemed to be a little ethereal, but the divine mirror instantly captured it. The divine mirror radiated its light on the divine palace. The light was especially blinding. Layers of divine light swirled around. In just a short moment, 3 layers of divine light appeared in the Desolation wheel in the divine mirror. The glorious light showered the entire space and reflected off the mountaintop. Many people could not help but look on in awe. Furthermore, this time, everything did not stop yet. Very quickly, the 4th layer of divine light appeared. It was even more magnificent. The radiance on the divine mirror got much brighter, so that it was almost blinding. Impressive, commended many practitioners from Donghua Academy. The 4th layer of divine light appeared, but it doesn't seem that it would stop. He was indeed the heir to the Desolate God Palace. When the 5th layer of divine light appeared, many people took on a serious look. It was the case for the members of various factions. In the direction of Lingxiao Palace, Ling He's eyes also looked in that direction. His psyche was a little disturbed by what he saw. He had also tested his own divine wheel before. It could cause the divine mirror of heavenly wheels to emit only 3 layers of divine light. According to the calculations by the seniors of the Donghua Academy, a practitioner who could seek the path to the high Renhuang level with a perfect grade divine wheel would also have a divine wheel of a higher level. On the other hand, it also meant that the higher the level of his divine wheel, the higher his chance of retaining a perfect great path when breaking through to the high Renhuang level. Some seniors of Donghua Academy also thought silently when they saw this unfold before them. It seemed that Jiang Yueli and Zhong Chan's divine wheels would not be a low level either. If this were the case, then that would prove that their hypothesis was correct. A person who could retain the perfection of their great path, at the high Renhuang level, would have a divine wheel of at least the third level. This corresponded to at least 3 layers of divine light in the divine mirror. This was just a conjecture that had no proof whatsoever. However, this was all very arcane. These numbers were usually contained within certain rules. There are already 5 layers of divine light. Many people were looking at the mirror. The level of this desolation's divine wheel was higher than those of all of the disciples of Donghua Academy, apart from Ninghua. The light from the divine mirror was stunning and eye-catching. However, the 6th layer of divine light did not appear in the end. This meant that Desolation's divine wheel was still slightly inferior to Ninghua's. With this, many practitioners of the Donghua Academy could vaguely accept this conclusion. After all, Desolation was already very famous. The 4 people were all figures of the Donghua domain, whose reputations were like the midday sun. Desolation, however, remained expressionless. No one knew if he was satisfied with 5 layers of divine light. He withdrew the radiance of his divine wheel. He levitated through the air and stopped in front of the level 8 virtuoso from Donghua Academy. The 2 of them faced each other in the empty space. Surrounded by ancient peaks, the path-seeking stage was extremely spacious. This gave combatants space to move as they liked. "Show me what you've got," Desolation said to his opponent. In an instant, the divine wheel of the level 8 virtuoso appeared. It was a huge, boundless golden picture, as though it were a stone wall. It gave off a particularly sharp feeling. In an instant, an endless golden glow appeared in the heavens, accompanying the glow of the picture on the divine wheel of the great path. A matrix seemed to appear in the heavens. Golden motifs flowed around the matrix. Streaks of glorious golden light shot straight down toward Desolation with murderous intent. The aura from Desolation suddenly turned frightening. A will of desolation shrouded the entire space, as though the whole world had become gray. A black tree seemed to appear on his body. The branches and leaves of the trees reached out into all directions and appeared in the space around him, as though they were countless limbs. Choo-choo! A sharp, piercing sound echoed into the distance. A terrifying picture appeared above Desolation, and the golden light that hammered down on him was unceasing, like the stream of the great path. However, a destructive black divine light shot upward from Desolation. The golden and black divine light streams collided like 2 streams of the great path flowing toward each other. A chaotic, destructive turbulence occurred at the point of collision. The Renhuang from the Donghua Academy floated in the air. The divine light of the great path bathed his body. A golden armor encased his body, and he seemed to give off an aura of invincibility. Endless divine light accompanied him as he shot downward. In the next instant, his body morphed into a beam of light. In the heavens, a straight beam of light shot down toward Desolation with killing intent. It pierced straight through the black, destructive lightning pervading the entire space. A fearsome storm appeared, and the entire world seemed to turn gray. Upon seeing his opponent closing in on him, Desolation did not even react. He stood there without moving. The divine light was incomparably swift, but at that moment, someone noticed that Desolation had made his move. He raised his hand and pointed forward. The golden light stopped, and a golden afterimage was left behind in the air. However, a finger appeared in front. The moment the finger appeared, the annihilating radiance of darkness in the surrounding region seemed to be absorbed into the finger. Terrifying black lightning penetrated the skies. "It's the finger of death. Be careful," a practitioner from Donghua Academy reminded. However, it was too late. When the finger of death appeared, everything else died. Boom! A horrifying radiance of darkness drowned out the entire space. Even the golden divine light was swallowed up. The crowd only saw a silhouette fly outward and collide with the matrix. A low sound echoed out, causing the matrix to tremble violently. The entire world seemed to take on a dull color. Streaks of black lightning coursed through the space. In front of Desolation, there was even the crisp crackling of lightning. That destructive flow caused everyone's hearts to turn cold. The finger of death was one of the ultimate skills of the desolate god palace. It was terrifying due to its shocking power. With just a finger, the level 8 Renhuang's breath became extremely weak. His great path was severely damaged. Everyone was shocked. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2018, Desolation Wheel. Chapter 2018, Desolation Wheel. A level 8 virtuoso was defeated with just a finger. The practitioners of Donghua Academy looked at Desolation, with a rather somber look in their eyes. The aura of the Great Path flowed around the virtuosos of the Donghua Academy, who were standing at various places. Their clothes fluttered, and they all seemed to want to challenge Desolation to a fight. This Desolation was a top-tier figure in the Desolate God Palace. He was too arrogant. It's best if you send a level 9 practitioner. Desolation spoke in the direction of the Donghua Academy practitioners. Even if the person were a disciple of the Donghua Academy, a level 8 virtuoso was still unable to match up with him. He had a perfect great path. He also had the ability to cause the divine mirror of heavenly wheels to emit 5 layers of divine light. It was more than sufficient for him to fight those who were one level higher than him. Moreover, even though that finger was an ultimate move, he did not display his true strength. He had only casually pointed. If he unleashed his Desolation Wheel, his opponent would not be able to withstand the might of his divine wheel alone. His opponent would be crushed straight away. There was no need for him even to act. It could only be said that he and his opponent were not on the same level. All the other practitioners understood this. The Desolation Wheel had a history nearly as far back as the God level. A level 8 virtuoso was bound to lose. However, he was a level 7 high-level Renhuang. It was not appropriate to send out a level 9 virtuoso just like that. After the level 8 Renhuang left the stage, Donghua Academy would send a level 9 virtuoso. It seems like Desolation wants to challenge the top prodigy in Donghua Heavens, Li Chongxing whispered as he stood on a mountaintop with the practitioners from Wangshan Watchtower. Ninghua was known as the top person among the 4 virtuosos. He had an extremely high reputation. On the other hand, Desolation was ranked 3rd. As one of the most influential and powerful characters around, he certainly wanted to meet Ninghua. If he could defeat everyone from the Donghua Academy, Ninghua would be forced to show himself. He is only at the 7th level. I think it'll be challenging. Someone from the Donghua Academy should be able to stop him, Yi Futian said. Desolation's great path was perfect, and if they were to consider his combat abilities, he could certainly take on a level 9 practitioner with an imperfect great path. However, this was Donghua Academy. Even though there weren't many figures like Ling He, there had to be people like him. For people like them, even if flaws started appearing in their great paths, they were still powerful. They could not be regarded as a typical Renhuang. Rather, they were somewhere in between the two. Moreover, this was the Donghua Academy, the top sacred grounds in the Donghua domain. There were definitely some powerful figures. Thus, from Yi Futian's perspective, if Desolation wanted to decimate all of Donghua Academy, he had to at least step into the 8th level for that to be possible. Li Chongxing nodded. As the top sacred grounds of the Donghua domain, there is no lack of powerful characters. We've witnessed it before. Some virtuosos have hidden themselves in the academy. There's no need to elaborate on the strength of the practitioners held in high regard by Donghua Academy. They are certainly very strong. It's just that the people in the older generation won't necessarily step in to help. Thus, there might not be that many people who can defeat Desolation. Yi Futian nodded and continued watching silently. Desolation was indeed very strong. The people he now contacted were the top-tier figures in the entire Divine Prefecture. They were no longer typical Renhuangs. Ninghua, Desolation, and the rest were all the most prodigious characters in the Donghua domain. At that moment, a practitioner from Donghua Academy stepped out. Everyone looked at that person, and expectedly, he was a level 9 Renhuang virtuoso. Oin! At that moment, a sword descended from a distance away. It levitated in the air, and a voice followed behind. Let me do it. The voice was very calm, and it made people feel secure. It seemed to come from the sword. When the Donghua Academy practitioners raised their heads and saw the sword, they instantly knew whose sword it was. Alright. The level 9 virtuoso who walked out initially did not have a tinge of hesitation. Yet he did not insist on the battle, and instead retreated, and let the newcomer take his place. Obviously, he was very convinced by the newcomer's strength. A silhouette appeared out of nowhere in the sky. He stood on the floating sword and looked down at Desolation. He was not young. He was a man in his 50s or 60s. He had obviously been cultivating for a very long time. His hair was tied cleanly behind him. He was cloaked in a very simple light blue robe. He looked extremely normal, but he gave off an extraordinary aura. It was like he had discarded everything material and had returned to his authentic true self. Brother! Several people from the Donghua Academy greeted him loudly. They looked at the silhouette in the air with respect. It was obvious that this elderly man was highly regarded. Yi Futian let out a rather intrigued expression. This elderly man was obviously quite old. He was a top-tier Renhuang who had cultivated for years. Yet he was a disciple of the Donghua Academy, and not a senior. That was quite interesting. However, this was also normal. The top sacred grounds of the Donghua domain naturally had no age restrictions. Many practitioners who came here looking for mentors might be very old. A swordsman. Li Changxing looked at the elderly man floating in midair, and seemed to remember who he was. He whispered, Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. Quite a few practitioners from Wangshan Watchtower had heard of the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor's name. They did not expect to be able to witness his techniques. This Black Tortoise Sword Emperor was a very famous figure, and was extremely powerful. He had already attained the 9th Renhuang level many years ago. He should now be at the pinnacle of Renhuang already. Many people guessed that the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor would have a chance to surpass the limitations of the Great Path and reach the next level. Of course, this was only a possibility. After all, taking that step was too difficult. Desolation looked up at the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor in the air, his expression unchanged. The Black Tortoise Sword Emperor said, Please. Just as he finished speaking, countless gray streams flowed towards the air from Desolation. The vast heaven and earth seemed to be sealed by those streams. At the same time, an impressive might of the sword appeared around the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. Swords appeared one after another and floated in space. On every sword, there seemed to be a picture printed on it. A screen of swords appeared in the heavens above. Tens of thousands of divine swords materialized everywhere. Boom! In the region of the Great Path, Desolation initiated his attack. Countless streaks of black lightning shot towards Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. Every streak of black lightning contained a terrifyingly destructive power. However, the swords around the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor revolved around him. These swords were a little larger than typical swords. The sword domain shrouded Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. A mirage of a massive black tortoise appeared. These swords had morphed into a giant black tortoise. Even though the black lightning strikes shot straight at it, they were unable to break it. More swords were materializing between heaven and earth, causing the body of the black tortoise to become increasingly huge. It covered the entire sky, and it was like a megasword matrix. A heavy, somber, murderous power permeated outwards from the Black Tortoise Sword Matrix and shrouded the entire space below it. Desolation raised his head. In the space above, the boundless gigantic black tortoise blocked out the horizon. If they were not at the path-seeking stage, this black tortoise might have become even larger. However, his region of the Great Path was also expanding. A limitless flow of destructive power shrouded the skies above him. Even the mega black tortoise sword matrix was shrouded within. Desolation's body floated into the air and continued to rise. He reached his arm out in front of him, and between his fingers swirled a terrifying aura. Boom! With his body at its center, a terrifying destructive storm materialized. He raised his hand and pointed at the skies, unleashing his finger of death. At the same instant, a limitless destructive flow exploded outwards. The power of that one finger caused beams of black light to appear in the air. They pierced through the air and shot straight at his opponent. At the same time, blades of light showered downwards. From the black tortoise sword matrix, swords rained downwards one after another, its might pressurizing this space. The black tortoise in the heavens seemed to let out a low roar. The black tortoise sword emperor also pointed down. Instantly, the infinitely massive black tortoise dove downwards. The sword matrix descended and collided with the finger of death. A loud boom rumbled out as the two beams of light collided and shattered at the same time. Under the overwhelming power of the black tortoise sword matrix that was pressing downwards, desolation retreated downward. Countless black leaves and branches twisted up to meet the sword matrix in the air, but they were all shattered. Crack! A terrifying sound echoed out. Above desolation, a black divine palace appeared. It carried an aura of bareness. It was the divine wheel forged from his core soul, the desolation wheel. Rumble! In the heavens above, everything darkened. The world morphed into sheer darkness. It was as though it were the end of the world. The battlefield was filled with a desolate, destructive aura. Countless black chains seemed to shoot out from the divine palace, reaching up into the skies and twisting towards the black tortoise sword emperor. These chains sealed the entire space, shrouding all directions and locking in heaven and earth. Desolation stood below, bathed in the aura permeating outwards from the desolation wheel. He seemed even more fearsome. At that moment, the infinitely giant black tortoise seemed to be particularly insignificant, as it was caged in the destructive dark world. Desolate tribulations, desolation said. Instantly, tens of thousands of streaks of light burst out from the desolation wheel. Like beams of judgment, they shot towards the black tortoise sword emperor. The scene was that if you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2019, Divine Wheel Levels. Chapter 2019, Divine Wheel Levels on the Path-Seeking Peak. The virtuosos from all over the world stared intently at the battleground. The destructive scene was chilling. In the heavens above, the unceasing desolate tribulations that hammered down on the massive black tortoise sword matrix caused it to shudder. A blinding light radiated outward from the black tortoise sword emperor. A giant black tortoise appeared and merged into the sword matrix. At that moment, the black tortoise was still getting larger, and the number of swords was also increasing. The desolate tribulation that was cascading downwards did not fade away. Rather, they morphed into chains that twisted around the black tortoise sword matrix, as though it were going to seal the entire sword matrix. At the same time, the desolation wheel in the heavens summoned an endless amount of power of the great path, sealing the entire battlefield. Desolation stood below his desolation wheel. Bathed in the radiance of destruction, he looked like he was covered in terrifying dark armor. His body became huge, and he morphed into the desolate god of war. He reached out his hands, and the desolate tribulations swirling around the black tortoise sword matrix were like chains that were wrapped around his arms, fully under his control. He clenched his fists tightly. Instantly, the limitless light of tribulation emitted a powerful destructive force in an attempt to annihilate the sword matrix. Yet the black tortoise sword matrix had formed a domain of its own, and the black tortoise sword emperor sealed himself within the domain. He actually took this terrifying attack straight on. The rumble of the great path echoed out, and the black tortoise sword matrix trembled. It actually pressed on downwards. The massive sword matrix contained a fearsome murderous power and a scary might. It caused the entire space to be extremely heavy and difficult to escape. Enduring this immense power, Desolation, who had morphed into a god of war, reached his hands out, palms facing the sky. His eyes let out a terrifying black light. In the skies above, the Desolation wheel emitted tens of thousands of desolate tribulations, shrouding the endless space. These desolate tribulations instantly swarmed to Desolation's body, swirling around him. At that moment, he seemed to be able to unleash a mighty finger of death. Yet, those desolate tribulations swirling around him fused into one. Billions of desolate tribulations were concentrated on his palm, and they morphed into an utterly catastrophic storm. The terrifying storm of desolate tribulations shot straight into the clouds. In his hands, a black demonic blade appeared. Limitless light of tribulations swirled around the blade, and cackled continuously like black lightning. The strength of the destructive power that seeped out was breath-stopping. Upon seeing the blade, all the practitioners from the Donghua Academy had a serious look in their eyes. This was the terrifying Dao technique passed down in the desolate God Palace. When Desolation raised his blade with both hands, a terrifying destructive power shot straight into the clouds. With a body like a god of wars, he cut once with his desolate blade. In that instant, the space seemed to be split into two by the destructive light of darkness. This slice could cut through space itself. At the same time, the eyes of the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor became serious. From the Black Tortoise Sword matrix that was revolving around his body, unlimited will of the sword shot out and condensed into a sword, appearing by his side. His hands formed a sword seal, and the sword matrix fused into one Black Tortoise divine sword. He looked downwards for a moment, and an extremely bright divine light burst out. The will of the sword split the heavens apart. When he swung his Black Tortoise sword, a rumble reverberated throughout heaven and earth. Two destructive beams of light collided with each other in the heavens. The sword and blade cut towards each other, and a terrifying shockwave of the great path seemed to shatter the matrices. An endless stream of fearsome desolate tribulations shot straight into the defense of the Black Tortoise Sword matrix. However, at that moment, a Black Tortoise image appeared behind the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. It morphed into a massive beast and refused to budge. Brother! Many people looked at the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. The desolate tribulations charged straight into the Black Tortoise Sword matrix. And on the Black Tortoise picture appeared lines of destructive light of tribulation that impacted his body. However, his long robe fluttered, and a shocking aura of the great path exploded outward. He refused to take even half a step back. His eyes glimmered brightly with a divine-like glow as he stared at the space below him. An endless will of the sword pierced through the desolate blade and shot straight at the dark silhouette, as though silently stating that if his opponent didn't retreat, he would not retreat either. Desolation lifted his head, and his jet-black eyes focused on the silhouette in the air. A rumble reverberated from his body, and fresh blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. However, his eyes were still impossibly determined. It was as though he was not bothered by it at all. At that moment, a glaring light radiated from the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor. The Black Tortoise picture lit up once again. He said a single word, break. As he spoke, a sound of shattering echoed out. The desolate blade crumbled inch by inch. At the same time, the sword also cracked and shattered. The two of them were simultaneously blown a great distance away. When the two of them stopped, their auras were fluctuating. The robe on the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor was torn apart, and his long hair that was tied became disheveled, flowing about in the wind. Desolation stood there without moving, his gaze fixated on the silhouette standing opposite him. Let's call this a draw. If your level were just a little higher, I would not have been able to break this slice. If this were a few years later, I would probably lose, the Black Tortoise Sword Emperor said. He seemed a little low-spirited. Having cultivated for so many years, he was already one of the top Renhuangs. Yet in his fight with this level 7 Renhuang Jr., he did not have the supreme advantage. This was the combat ability bestowed by a perfect great path. His potential was indeed unlimited. A loss is a loss. That was not a draw. Desolation's tone was icy, as though he had always been like that. The people with him similarly gave off an extremely cold and emotionless feeling. However, he did admit that he had lost this battle. Of course, he would not feel too discouraged. Even though he was an extremely proud individual and wanted to challenge Ning Hua and the Donghua Academy's virtuosos, he did not really believe that he was undefeatable. This was, after all, Donghua Academy, the top sacred grounds of the Donghua domain. He was arrogant, but he was not blindly overconfident of himself. The two of them retreated to their respective mountain peaks. Desolation sat cross-legged and started to restore his strength. He suffered decently severe injuries from the fight just now, even though it was not visible on the surface. But for a person like him to vomit fresh blood, the damage he suffered must have been significant. Thus he had to rest and recover for a while. Lu Qingzhu looked at the crowd and said, "The desolate God Palace is the ruler of their territory. This generation's heir to the desolate god is indeed powerful. Everyone who is here today is influential in their respective continents. You can take this opportunity to spar with each other. If you have a perfect great path, you can use the divine mirror of heavenly wheels to test your own divine will levels. Many people reflexively looked in the direction of the divine palace of fluttering snow and Wangshan watchtower. More precisely, they looked at Jiang Yueli from the divine palace of fluttering snow and Zhong Chan from the Wangshan watchtower. Everyone had witnessed Desolation's overpowering strength from before. These two people were on the same level as Desolation, so everyone was interested in their strength. Desolation had already appraised the level of his divine wheel. Then, how many layers of divine light would be emitted by Jiang Yueli and Zhong Chan's divine wheels? Many people were very eager to find out. Seeing this, Lu Qingzhu smiled and said, "It seems like everyone wants to see Goddess Jiang and Zhong Chan. Why don't you both satisfy everyone's curiosity?" Jiang Yueli stood on the ancient peak. She looked magnificent. Her bright and spirited eyes looked at the Zhong Chan. She said, "In that case, would Zhong Chan like to go first?" Obviously, he did not refuse. To her, it was nothing that needed to be hidden. Moreover, she was also a little curious to know the level of her divine wheel. At the Wangshan watchtower side, everyone looked at Zhong Chan in front. Li Changxing smiled and said, "Brother Zhong, good luck." "All right." Zhong Chan nodded and calmly walked out. His silhouette floated down to above the path-seeking stage and faced the divine mirror of heavenly wheels between the two ancient peaks. In the next moment, Zhong Chan unleashed his great path divine wheel. It was a massive stone steel that contained a shocking great path aura of suppression. His divine wheel appeared in the divine mirror of heavenly wheels. Light shone on Zhong Chan, and following that, light revolved around in the divine mirror. Layers of divine light appeared, and everyone stared at it. Zhong Chan also looked at the mirror. He was chosen by his respected teacher. Since his cultivation was quite similar to his teacher's, his great path divine wheel was also forged at Wangshan watchtower. Thus, the level of his divine wheel should not be low, right? Under everyone's intense gaze, the divine light shimmered. Not long later, 5 layers of divine light appeared. They were all especially brilliant and vivid. Everyone was secretly surprised. Zhong Chan and Desolation were the same. Their great path divine wheels were both at the 5th level, and could cause the divine mirror of heavenly wheels to emit 5 layers of divine light. In the distance, the practitioners of the Wangshan watchtower silently let out a sigh of relief. They were initially a little worried that Zhong Chan's divine wheel would be inferior to that of Desolation, but it seemed like they were just paranoid. To cultivate to such a level, Zhong Chan would not be inferior to the other people. Zhong Chan himself was rather calm. He was neither surprised nor disappointed. He raised his head and looked at Jiang Yueli. He smiled and said, "Goddess Jiang, please." As he finished speaking, he returned to his own mountain peak. Li Changxing patted his back. It was not easy for Wangshan watchtower to have someone among the 4 most influential figures in the Donghua domain. Jiang Yueli nodded, and her silhouette descended to face the divine mirror of heavenly wheels. Her divine wheel was in the form of a sword. The moment her sword appeared, and the entire space became extremely cold. That was the extremely cold chilling moon blade. The sword was as cold as the freezing moon. The light that it emitted caused everyone to feel a frosty aura that chilled them to their bones. When the sword appeared in the divine mirror of heavenly wheels, ice and snow appeared in the divine mirror as well, and the entire mirror turned a pure white. It was as though the mirror sensed the freezing will of the sword. Layers of divine light revolved around, and the result was the same as Desolation's and Zhong Chan's. It was still 5 layers of divine light. The 3 virtuosos had very comparable divine will levels. This also seemed to prove Donghua Academy's hypothesis that a practitioner who ascended to a high-level Renhuang with a perfect great path would have a divine wheel of level 4 to 6. Ning Hua's was the 6th level, while those of the other 3 were similar to each other's in the middle at the 5th level. A slight ripple coursed through the hearts of everyone who was watching. Indeed, no one had yet to surpass Ning Hua. They were all weaker than him. However, the 3 of them were close to each other. It might not be the case for their combat abilities, but it was definitely the case for the levels of their divine wheels. Similarly, Jiang Yueli did not show much emotion and calmly returned to the mountain peak, where the practitioners from the divine palace of fluttering snow stood. Even though it was a pity that she was not on the same level as Ning Hua, there must be a reason why Ning Hua was known as the most influential figure. Even though they had never fought before, she had heard of his name a couple of times. Not bad, Lu Qingzhu praised. Among the 4 most influential characters in our Donghua domain, 3 of them have level 5 perfect grade divine wheels. It is indeed valuable. Now, is there any Renhuang practitioners who have forged a perfect grade divine wheel and want to appraise their divine wheels? Even though there were only a few such people among the high-level Renhuangs, many middle-level and low-level Renhuangs had perfect grade divine wheels. Perhaps there might be someone who might attain the same level as these 3, or close to them at the 4th level. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.